It's late at night on the beach, and a massive group of college students is throwing a wild, no holds barred party. Mitch, ever the cautious one, makes everyone toss their phones into a bag. No pictures, no videos, no evidence of whatever crazy stuff might go down. The vibe is electric, and everyone's having a blast. Then, out of nowhere, Vance and Gilbert show up with something bizarre. A weird, squishy ball made of some kind of goo they found floating in the ocean. They're hyped about it and start talking about building a bigger fire to burn the thing. But before they can get anywhere with their plan, tempers flare, insults fly, a heated argument breaks out, and the goo ball is completely forgotten in the chaos. The next morning, Kaylee wakes up beside Mitch in the lifeguard stand, and things are super awkward between them as the memories of last night come flooding back. Meanwhile, their four friends are crammed in a car, groggy and disoriented, while Marcia wakes up on a table, only to immediately lean over and get sick. As Kaylee looks around, she notices something weird. The beach is littered with abandoned stuff, shoes, bags, random objects, but there's not a single person in sight. It's eerie. To make things even stranger, she spots a bird struggling on the ground. Before she can even process what's happening, the bird starts sinking into the sand like the ground is swallowing it whole. Kaylee's heart races. Something is definitely not right. Marcia takes a step, and instantly her feet sink into the sand. Kaylee shouts at her to stop, but it's too late. Marcia's feet are trapped, and when she tries to free herself by pressing her hands into the sand, they get stuck too. At first, the group in the car thinks she's joking, but her terrified screams and panicked tears quickly convince them something is very wrong. Vance, determined to help, ignores the others' warnings and leaps out of the car. But within seconds, he's also caught, his legs sinking into the sand. When he starts screaming in pain, Mitch and Jonah want to rush to his aid, but the girls hold them back, realizing it's too dangerous. As Vance struggles, the sand seems to come alive. Thin, thread-like strands pull him down, and half his face disappears beneath the surface. Jonah tries to start the car, but it won't budge. Mitch grabs a buoy tied to a rope and throws it toward Vance, but it falls short. In a matter of minutes, both Vance and Marcia are swallowed by the sand, leaving the group in stunned silence, staring at the now eerily calm surface. After the chaos, the group huddles together, trying to figure out their next move. Calling 911 isn't an option. Their phones are locked in the trunk, and the car's dead battery means Jonah still can't get it to start. As they brainstorm, Kaylee cautiously holds her hand near the sand, careful not to touch it. To everyone's shock, strange, wispy strands rise from the ground, as if the sand itself is alive. The group freezes, unsure what to make of it. Just then, Gilbert wakes up. He's been crammed inside a trash can, a victim of a party prank that left him with a silly drawing on his face. Groggy and furious, he starts yelling at his friends for abandoning him. He struggles to climb out, ignoring their frantic warnings. It's only when someone blurts out that two people have already died that Gilbert stops cold. His anger fades as the gravity of the situation sinks in. He admits he's stiff and sore from being stuck in the can, and Mitch points out that the rising tide will eventually push him closer to the group, whether he likes it or not. Meanwhile, Kaylee pulls Mitch into the lifeguard stand, leaving Jonah outside. Jonah watches them, a flicker of jealousy in his eyes. Chanda notices and gently reminds him that he needs to let go of whatever's holding him back. As the strange, wispy strands creep closer, trying to wrap around the car tires, Kaylee and Mitch rummage through the cooler and find some alcohol. They start drinking to calm their nerves. Hours drag on, and still no one comes to rescue them. The sun beats down relentlessly, and the group tries to shield themselves with a towel, desperate for relief. Kaylee, mustering some courage, finally asks Mitch about what happened the night before. Mitch reassures her they just talked, nothing more. Meanwhile, Mitch spots sunscreen in the lifeguard stand and grabs it. Kaylee tosses it to her friends in the car, who are baking in the heat. As they piece together the events of the previous night, a horrifying realization hits them. The other partygoers didn't just leave, they were swallowed by the sand. The group breaks down in tears, except for Gilbert, who starts panicking as the scorching sun burns his skin. Jonah quickly throws him the sunscreen, which helps Gilbert calm down, at least for the moment. Kaylee suddenly notices the gooey ball they found earlier. It's now dried up and split in two. Ronnie points out the obvious. It's not a ball at all. It's an egg. And whatever hatched from it is the monster lurking in the sand, the one that's been snatching people. Since it was only born last night, Kaylee figures it's still small, which might be their only advantage. To test the monster's reach, Kaylee grabs a sausage from the cooler and tosses it onto the sand. Instantly, thin, thread-like strands shoot out, dragging the sausage underground. The group throws more sausages to see how far the monster's reach extends, but the strands keep coming, seemingly endless. A bird swoops down, tempted by the sausage, only to be caught and killed in seconds by the monster's deadly threads. Finally, they throw one last sausage in a different direction. This time, nothing happens. No strands, no movement. That's their safe zone. It's not far, but it's enough to give them a fighting chance, even if getting there is still risky. The group starts arguing again, and Ronnie points out the obvious. They haven't seen a single car or person for hours. This place is anything but normal. Jonah, however, isn't ready to give up. Spotting two surfboards in the car, he grabs them and tosses them onto the sand. The monster doesn't react, so he hops onto one, then the other, carefully shuffling forward. It's a risky plan, but it seems to work until Kaylee shouts a warning. "Keep your fingers away from the sand." Jonah pauses and suddenly brings up last night's drama, calling out everyone who cheated. His friends try to shut it down, insisting they focus on escaping first. But Jonah's too fired up to listen. He keeps moving, inching closer to safety. When he reaches a bench, disaster strikes. The surfboard slips, and he nearly falls. At the last second, he grabs the bench, saving himself. The others notice something terrifying. The monster's strands are slowly pulling the boards back. They yell at Jonah to return, but he's determined to make it. Just as he's about to reach the table, the strands lash out, brushing against his stomach. He leaps to safety, but not without a cost. The strands leave bleeding cuts, and Jonah starts feeling dizzy. He collapses on the table, his ears ringing with a high-pitched sound that drowns out his friends' worried voices. After a few seconds, Jonah snaps out of it, groaning in pain. "It feels like 1,000 jellyfish stings," he mutters. Ronnie examines the wounds and realizes the strands aren't just sharp, they're poisonous. Jonah takes a deep breath, pushing through the pain to check the bag on the bench. Inside, he finds some food, including a banana. When he accidentally drops it, he notices something strange. The banana doesn't sink. Curious, he picks it up and lowers it again, watching closely. This time, the monster emerges from the sand, but avoids the area near the bonfire. Jonah's heart races as he tests his theory. He jumps off the bench, landing on the same spot. Nothing happens. The monster stays away. Fire is its weakness. Relieved, Jonah celebrates by eating the banana, but his relief is short-lived. His stomach wounds start oozing pus, and panic sets in. Kaylee steps in, her voice calm but firm, guiding him back to the table and urging him to check the bag again. This time, he finds drinks and starts tossing them to his friends. But as he throws the last can, the bench cracks beneath him. He slips, and his wounds worsen, dripping pus and then bleeding heavily. The pain is unbearable, and he screams, but he doesn't give up. With every ounce of strength, he drags himself back onto the table. Meanwhile, something even more unsettling happens. The surfboards begin moving on their own. The monster is stealing their only means of escape, leaving them trapped and desperate. The monster's slimy tendrils slither under the car, wrapping around the tires and trying to twist them. Gilbert, desperate, asks about the phones. Ronnie springs into action, tugging at the back seats to get to the trunk, but they won't budge. She decides to climb onto the bumper to open the trunk from the outside, but the metal is scorching hot. Grabbing a towel, she covers the trunk to protect her hands. Before she moves, Ronnie turns to Chanda and hands her a heartfelt request. "If something happens to me, please give this letter to my mom. It's in my notebook." With Chanda holding her hands for balance, Ronnie carefully crawls onto the trunk and lowers herself onto the bumper. Meanwhile, Kaylee checks on the others. Jonah is out cold, and Gilbert is fading fast, the heat and sharp metal digging into his skin. Ronnie struggles with the trunk, managing to get the keys in the lock, but the lid slips and nearly sends her tumbling. She catches herself just in time. On her second attempt, the trunk lid slams into her legs, causing her to slip and land on top of the trunk, shutting it again. Kaylee suggests Ronnie needs to lean back to open it fully, but the towel they're using as a makeshift rope isn't long enough. Mitch and Kaylee remember the rescue hook in the lifeguard stand and pass it to Ronnie. The car shakes violently as the monster stabs the tires, making it even harder for Ronnie to keep her balance. Finally, after a nerve-wracking struggle, she gets the trunk open. But just as she's about to grab the phones, a loud honk blares from another car that's appeared on the beach. The sudden noise startles Ronnie, and she slips. The trunk slams shut, trapping her fingers. She screams in pain as the others shout and wave frantically, trying to get the attention of the newcomer. The tension is unbearable. Will help arrive in time, or is the monster closing in? Officer Alex, a member of the beach patrol, pulls up in his car near the group and rolls down his window to inform them the beach is closed. The friends quickly try to explain the bizarre and terrifying situation they're in, but Alex brushes it off, assuming they've had too much to drink or taken something illegal. He steps out of his car, confident and dismissive, and starts walking around the beach. Surprisingly, nothing happens to him at first. The strange, grasping strands on the ground can't penetrate his sturdy boots. Alex mocks Gilbert for his appearance and the doodle on his face, then tries to pull him free from the sand, but it's no use. He moves on to Ronnie, attempting to free her fingers, but again, he fails. Frustrated, he starts insulting the group, accusing them of being high or drunk. Kaylee snaps back, calling him useless. The tension escalates as Alex heads to the lifeguard stand, arguing with Kaylee and Mitch. He threatens to use force if they don't come down, but they refuse. In a moment of carelessness, he reaches for his pepper spray and drops his car keys. When he bends down to pick them up, the strands suddenly grab his hand, trapping him. Kaylee shouts at him to use the pepper spray on the strands. He does, and the strands retreat underground, releasing him. But it's too late. His arm has already been partially eaten, and he collapses in pain. As the monster begins to drag him under, Ronnie manages to grab the pepper spray from the ramp of the lifeguard stand. Despite Alex's desperate pleas for help, Ronnie ignores him, leaving him to sink into the sand and meet his grim fate. Mitch spots Alex's boots and decides to protect his feet by slipping on his flip-flops. He asks Chanda for her towels to wrap around his feet for extra safety. Catching the first towel is easy, but as he reaches for the second, disaster strikes. The railing gives way and Mitch tumbles onto the sand below. In an instant, the monster's tendrils surge forward, wrapping around him like a deadly net. The group can only watch in horror as Mitch is dragged down, the tendrils piercing his skin and burrowing into his body. Blood spills as the creature consumes him, his shirt disintegrating and the tendrils bursting grotesquely from his eyes and mouth. Within moments, Mitch is gone, swallowed by the sand, leaving only a dark stain as a grim reminder of his fate. As the group processes the loss, Kaylee notices something strange. The monster is moving the broken railing. Thinking quickly, she tells Chanda to grab it. Kaylee snaps off more pieces of the railing and throws them to Chanda along with the towel. Then, in a daring move, Kaylee takes a leap of faith, jumping from the stand and landing safely on the car below. The group is left reeling, but Kaylee's quick thinking offers a glimmer of hope in their desperate fight for survival. Things get intense as emotions run high. Kaylee, fed up with Chanda for flirting with her boyfriend, Jonah, throws a punch, and the two girls decide to call it even. Jonah apologizes to Kaylee, and they exchange heartfelt "I love yous," trying to patch things up. Meanwhile, Gilbert, still stuck in the trash can, uses the last of his energy to turn himself around so he can talk to his friends more easily. But the monster's creepy, blood-seeking strands are still lurking, inching closer to the dripping blood. Kaylee and Chanda work together to pull Ronnie's injured body closer, managing to free her hand. They quickly wrap it with a towel to stop the bleeding. To escape, they lay pieces of the railing on the sand like a makeshift bridge. Chanda goes first, explaining as she crosses that nothing actually happened between her and Jonah the night before. Once she makes it safely to the table, Kaylee follows, desperate to reach Jonah. Ronnie tries to cross next, but gets distracted when she notices blood seeping through the towel. She loses her balance and starts to fall, but Kaylee acts fast, spraying pepper spray to slow down the monster's strands. Ronnie seems okay at first, and Kaylee grabs her arm to pull her up, but the monster isn't done. Its slimy strands wrap around Ronnie's other arm and yank her down, dragging her into the sand. Everyone screams in horror as Ronnie sinks, helpless. Meanwhile, the monster's strands creep closer to Gilbert's trash can, unnoticed by the group. Shonda, determined to survive, decides to try Mitch's idea. She wraps her feet in towels for protection and makes a run for it. She sprints across the sand and manages to climb onto Alex's car, but the monster isn't letting anyone go that easily. It shakes the car violently, sending Shonda tumbling onto the hood. She hits her head hard and passes out. Back at the trash can, Gilbert feels it shift and panics, but the movement stops after a few seconds. He thinks it's over until he coughs up blood and massive tentacles burst out of the can, wrapping around him. In an instant, they drag him under, leaving only a trail of blood behind. The monster is relentless, and the group is running out of time and options. The final confrontation is here, and survival seems more impossible than ever. As night settles in, Chanda wakes up and notices a raft sitting on top of the car. She tosses it onto the sand, creating a path to the table so she can help Kaylee move Jonah into the car. But just as they're about to make their move, the ground begins to shake violently. Kaylee loses her balance and falls back onto the raft. Before she can get up, a glowing tentacle bursts out of nowhere, lunging at her. Kaylee dodges just in time, but the tentacle slams the car door shut and vanishes. Determined to fight back, Kaylee climbs onto the car and grabs a gas can. The tentacle reappears, smashing the can and dousing itself in gasoline. Undeterred, Kaylee grabs another can and pours its contents onto the sand. She pulls out a box of matches, and as the tentacle lunges again, she strikes a match and hurls it at the creature. The tentacle bursts into flames, writhing and screeching in agony. Chanda quickly opens the car door, and Kaylee jumps inside. The monster, now furious, tries to pry the door open, but the girls pull with all their might to keep it shut. It slams its massive, fiery strands against the car, but the vehicle holds strong. Defeated, the creature retreats into the darkness. Exhausted and shaken, the girls finally catch their breath, but their relief is short-lived. They realize Jonah is gone. Overwhelmed with grief, they break down in tears, holding each other as the weight of their loss sinks in. The next morning, sunlight glistens on the ocean as a surfer stumbles upon the car parked near the shore. Curious, he taps on the window, startling Kaylee and Chanda awake. Groggy but relieved, the girls step out onto the sand, their feet sinking into the soft grains. There's no sign of the monster, no eerie sounds, no looming danger. It's as if the nightmare of the previous night has vanished with the tide. As Kaylee and Chanda begin their journey back home, the creature isn't done yet. Far out in the sea, it swims silently, its dark form cutting through the waves. It's searching for a new beach, a new group of unsuspecting victims to haunt. The battle may be over for now, but the danger is far from gone.